Hey, Bill, can you guys hear me?
Hey, James, absolutely. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just like you're sitting right next to me.
Where are you, James?
He's on the Zoom.
I'm doing fantabulous. I hope you guys are doing well.
Where are you?
I am going to be in the D.C. area for work shortly.
Well, I'm glad you're not someplace fun and exotic.
Oh, wait. He will be.
Oh, I got more travel to come after tonight, but yeah, just the Beltway.
But it's nighttime, so. I haven't seen, there was that truck that did the Kona Ice. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, so there's the way, and we had Kona Ice for ice cream with the cops. So of course every weekend we would talk to Kona Ice about, how does this work? And they talked about how they set their truck up and how they purchase it. They have to sign the national letter for all the Kona Ice trucks, but they own their truck after
Really?
a few months. But yeah, it's just you show them.
I haven't
It's
seen
just
him
bags
recently
of
though.
ice
He used to come down.
syrup.
And
He
sugar
used to come
water.
down to
Sugar
Ixpo all the time.
There's a couple more people coming on, should be coming online, so if you wait a few more minutes.
Pretty nice day today in Charlottesville.
Warm.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
So my daughter and
See
Nats,
ya.
they were like,
Happy to feel all this warm weather.
Are you?
Summer girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think July's gonna be.
oh, tomorrow's my birthday.
I do have a couple of trips this year that I probably need to give you dates on.
Okay.
because I'll be out of the country. Hopefully I won't miss too much.
As long as we have a quorum.
We'll be there Monday.
And we'll fill you in on what,
December, right, as we kind of get the visitors coming to the, it sounds like a January policy, right? You got a wrestling tournament this weekend, or is wrestling season all over?
Wrestling's over.
Oh, okay.
Wrestling's over, but, no, they're going back to playing Sunday.
Oh, great.
Tomorrow. Yeah, the one down there, it's hiring today, so.
So I have the password, I just can't figure out how to use it.
We'll see.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
bring
lock
some
me
credit.
out. I've got
I had to go to IT.
oh, God.
You don't want to run for
So you came to
I did.
Because I couldn't, in particular,
Tyler.
Tyler.
Yeah.
You see that setup, but come to, yeah, I need to stay here. Where we going?
And you have to physically go there.
Yeah, it's in the annex. He's on the fourth floor of the annex building, which is the one that's next to City Hall.
Oh, that's right. No,
Across the
where
street
the
from City
registrar
Hall.
is. Yeah,
Oh.
so there's the registrar's
Yeah.
up down, that building.
But I find it very cumbersome to work with.
Yeah.
And we almost need a.
The tablet for you? Is that what you got? Or did you
Yeah.
get one of these?
I would much rather have one of those. No, I hate this thing.
Oh, my God.
Can you get us one of those?
I don't know. I mean, I've had this one almost a year and a half. they
It would
gave
be
you a-
so much easier, because I'm sitting here pen
They
checking.
gave you tablets.
It's horrible.
Must be.
Bill,
Yes.
can you get us a laptop? This thing is horrible. It's horrible. I'm sitting here having to pen you know. It's, that would be great if you could.
Signal fixed.
Not to mention, I can't even figure out how to. Hey, somebody's got to train me on this thing, because my iPad is very intuitive. This one is not.
What is it?
I don't know.
It's a Surface tablet, Microsoft. Is that what they, is that?
They're pretty good if you have a keyboard like that.
Maybe I just need to get a keyboard
Yeah.
connected to it, and then I can,
Let's see, let me get.
that would make sense.
You got her,
She needs the link, Bill. Do you have
I
it?
got
handy?
it.
Did you get her email?
Yeah.
I'm online, but is there a Zoom link I should use instead?
Well, she should have gotten a invitation yesterday
Okay.
at Wednesday PM
From you, right?
from,
Did you
from,
get the invitation yesterday from IT in the city, question mark? See if I can find it.
okay.
Let's see.
Well, given the time, I think we might want to get started until maybe Lakeisha gets
One line.
on, because we just have a little bit of housekeeping, and then it will be over to the chief. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. Are there any announcements? I have a couple, one of which is that item 10 on the city council agenda on Monday is the appointment of an executive director. So the executive director, by all indications, will be appointed Monday and will come on board 1st of May. The second announcement is that, there's Lakeisha, all right.
Oh, she got on?
She is on.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll stop looking.
The second announcement is that Jeff is a TV star.
Yes.
He was on the evening news last night, well, and I think
The
also
The chief and I got ambushed by the reporter.
they were out for basically for the walk and talk, and that's a really good development, and I hope we can have members continue.
Bill, what do we know about the new ED? It's a secret.
I've been told not to announce her name, but she has about 15 years experience, 20 years experience in internal affairs in a large eastern city, and really impressed both of the interview panels. So I'm looking forward to the formal announcement on Monday. To start with the housekeeping, we have to approve the agenda. Susan, would you like to make a motion to add an item?
Yes, I would. I'd like to make a motion to add onto the agenda a discussion about the hearing examiners.
How about we put that right at the end?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second?
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Krishna?
Yes.
Yes. Carries unanimously. The second item is the approval of our minutes from the last meeting, which were circulated with our package. Is there a move to approve or to amend?
Move that we approve them as written?
I'll second that.
Yes.
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 All right, passed unanimously. And now I'd like to introduce as our guest, Chief Michael Kachis. I'm very happy to see that he's come to talk about his vision for policing and how he's going to interact with us on oversight.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Board. I really do appreciate the invite tonight. And like you were talking about earlier about the walk and talks and being out there with us yesterday, I do appreciate you coming out and with
Oh,
us. I think
great.
it means a lot. And
Thank you.
there'll be plenty of opportunities to join us. We don't plan on stopping doing them. We will be doing them weekly for the foreseeable future. And it's really just to get out and to listen to folks in, really hear what they want of their police department. The conversations that we're having are, organic conversations in folks' front yards, on their porches, in their living rooms, about hearing what they want of their police department and the issues that mean so much to them. And so I've gotten a lot out of that. We started doing it right away, and we'll continue to do it. And I'm really optimistic with more and more people coming out. So thank you. I do appreciate it. As for our relationship and my vision of how we would react, how we are going to interact with the PCOB, we've already started doing that in a few different ways. Our hiring blitzes that we've had, we've now added a member of the PCOB to the hiring panel. So our hiring process includes a written exam, physical agility, and then a panel interview. And I know some of you have already sat in on that panel interview to actually have a say on who we're bringing into this police department, who we're hiring. We have to hire a lot of people. I have 30 vacancies. That's a lot. And so, there's a saying out there, I'd rather hire no one than the wrong one. And that's true, because making sure we are hiring folks that are right for this community. And I think that's important, because we've all seen what happens when you don't hire the right people. So we are going to be laser focused on that. I'm going to talk about a few things that we're doing within the police department. I won't stand up here and talk for long, because I want to take your questions as well. So a few things. We are in the process of developing or updating our vision, mission, and values. Anytime you set out in a new organization, that's something you have to look at. You have to make sure you're defining what your clear purpose is, especially internally to the rank and file. So I have a Chiefs Advisory Board that meets regularly, and they are representative of the entire organization. And they have sent me a few drafts. I'll probably take bits and pieces of that and put that together and develop our mission, vision, and values, which will drive our strategic planning process, which will start shortly thereafter. And that strategic plan will really set out to be a roadmap for the next 3 years of what we're doing and how we're going to proceed moving forward in everything from training to leadership development to performance management. And so I'm excited about that. We are moving in the right direction with that process, and so it's very important that we do that. What's equally as important is making sure that process of that strategic planning process is correct. So, and I do plan on including the PCOB in these conversations. When I do put this mission, vision, and values together, I want your opinion on it, right? I want to know what you think. And so I know Mr. Mendez and I have regular conversations about many things, and I just feel that a relationship of transparency with the PCOB, between the police department and PCOB, is going to be very important to me. There's a few things that I know will probably be of very interest of the PCOB, that I'll talk about. One is the structure of our internal affairs unit. So we have had, under Chief Brackney, we had a position called a Fourth Amendment auditor. And I got to tell you, it's an excellent, excellent position. It's something that you don't see in many agencies. So when Chief Brackney brought that in, I think it was very innovative and something that I'm going to continue using. I have assigned that Fourth Amendment auditor to internal affairs. They were kind of just out there on their own for a while. And so what the auditor does within the department, the auditor reviews all investigative detentions. So the auditor will literally come in and watch all the body worn camera footage, look at things that could have done better, things they did right. Are there some training things we need to see? Are there some issues that may be of a larger scale that we need to identify? And so I felt like that is a natural fit to be within the internal affairs, because if they do see things or things that need to be addressed at a more formal level, we can do that. And so they're all in one shop. The other thing is from a policy standpoint, and I know Mr. Mendez and I have talked about this, about reviewing our bias-based policing policy. I know it's something that you all are looking at. I've reviewed it recently, and I agree it needs to be updated. And so I look forward to working with the PCOB in updating that policy. A few things we are doing in the immediacy is that, one, our implicit bias training that we are mandated by the state to do every year. I am taking that from a virtually based training that would be sent out to officers and they would just do it online, which from what I understand actually was very good training, to in-person training. I just, in my opinion, and maybe it's the old school part of me, but I prefer in-person stuff. That's just how I am. And so that will be, I just think it's too important of a topic to do virtually. And so we're going to put that as in-person training, and I'm reaching out to a few folks that I know who does that. We are also going to be bringing in Guardian Score. Guardian Score is a company that I worked with when I was in Warrenton that did, it was almost like a real-time survey. Now, we're not there yet for that piece of it, because it measures procedurally justice principles when stopped by the police or an interaction with law enforcement. But we are going to be using Guardian Score, and we're contracting with them to come in and teach every one of our officers a class on procedural justice. What does that mean? We talk about it a lot, but what does that actually mean? And so we are going to train the entire agency on that, and we are in the process of working through the contract and whatnot. So but that'll be coming out soon. So those are some of the things we are doing in the immediacy. I could sit and talk about all the other things when it comes to our community policing outreach and the different programs we are developing designed to involve the community with the police department. But for this meeting, I figure I'll stick with the stuff that I think are near and dear to you all, and I'll take your questions.
When you came on board, you said that one of the one of the pillars that you would be sort of minding and strengthening was officer wellness.
Yeah.
What initiatives?
Yeah. So,
going on?
well, it's the treatment of our staff. So the treatment and wellness of our staff, how we treat our officers, right? So it's important for us to make sure that we are modeling the behavior that we want our officers to have when they're out there dealing with the public. So if we're going to talk about treating the community in a procedurally just way, we need to begin by doing that internally as well. Process matters, right? And I don't have to tell you all this because, you know, the internal affairs process is a perfect example, right? How we treat officers through that process matters. And so, so internally, we are focusing on those processes that exist now. Where can we make them a little better, and work through that. From a wellness standpoint, you know, it's a huge challenge. You think about this for a minute. We often talk about the mental health crisis that we're dealing with. I mean, let's just be clear: the mental health system in Virginia is in complete crisis. And I've been saying that for 2 years, and we can still say that. That's a problem. That impacts our officers as well when they need to get help or go talk to someone. Finding someone to talk to is not easy. You would think it would be. It's not. So, and on that mental health piece, I will quickly just talk about something we have started to look into, and it's a co-response model of policing with a mental health clinician. So we have had one meeting with social services, Region 10, and my command staff about ways we can start to talk about what a co-response model looks like. Is it a therapist in the passenger seat of a police car, or is it an embedded clinician at the police department? You know, what does that look like? I will tell you, there are some challenges, the biggest of which is staffing. We're not the only ones dealing with staffing shortages. Social services dealing with staffing shortages. Region 10 is. But I will say there is a want, there is a need for this, and we're gonna work hard, and with the right folks at the table having these conversations, I'm optimistic that we could get something done. And what I have found is that when you have either an embedded clinician or folks who are working with our officers every day that are professionals in that field, well, there's a resource as well for our officers. And so trying to build that out is going to be one of our priorities over the next 3 years.
Chief, just following up on that a little bit and putting on my psychologist hat, you're right. I mean, the number of providers in Charlottesville is way down. Region 10's understaffed. A lot of people aren't even taking insurance anymore. It's a crisis of huge proportions. That said, and I'm certainly willing to talk to you about this, you know, there are options in terms of telehealth with therapists that specialize in dealing with first responders, with trauma, job-related trauma, and that might be a way to go, just to have that in your back pocket, because you're not gonna, it's gonna take a while to get up to speed. This community, I get calls once a week from somebody, can you refer me?
Yeah.
Well, I can refer you to Dr. Mendez, but he has a 10-week waiting list.
Yep.
Well, I'm in crisis.
Yeah.
It's a terrible problem.
It
And
is.
having done some work with the department in the past, in terms of stress management, it's desperately needed. I mean, this
It is.
job is highly, I don't have to tell you.
Well, it is, and think about it. Like, what our officers deal with each and every day. I watch the body cam footage randomly when I come in and just see they're dealing with, people that are going through absolute crisis, and they feel helpless. We
They're not
oftentimes will feel
psychologists.
helpless.
We shouldn't
Right, yeah.
expect them to be.
Right.
So anyway,
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
What kind of training are you providing the officers in dealing with mental health
Yeah.
issues with this lack of actual code?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So my goal is to have 100% of our staff trained in crisis intervention training. And so it's CIT training. It's a 1-week course. We offer it to our officers when they get out of the police academy. So we have officers that are graduating in May. They still have 4 weeks of in-house training. 1 week of that is crisis intervention training. So that is mandated. So that's a start. And but my goal, hopefully, is to get us 100%, and we'll get there. Well, a lot of our officers have already been through CIT training.
Just one question. It's very general. I'm not sure you can answer it. Later in the meeting, we're going to be talking about the disciplinary general orders and the disciplinary matrix and the code of conduct and issues like that. Do you see any changes or revisions in those documents coming down the pike?
I'm open to suggestions.
Okay.
I'm open to suggestions. Let's look at them.
Okay.
Right. I think I think it might be helpful as well to. I know we're going to be doing some training to have our accreditation manager speak with this group, because there are certain things in our policies that we are mandated to have. So the oversight from an accreditation standpoint is significant. Okay, we are accredited through VALEPSI. It's the Virginia State accreditation, and every 3 years we have assessors come in from the outside and they dig through all of our policies, and we have to show proofs. So what I mean by proofs, if we have a policy that says let's just say, we have to write a report with this type of incident. If the policy says that, we have to show a proof that we're actually doing that. And so, and if you don't, you can lose your accreditation. Now, we are in the process now of taking it one step further and transitioning from state accreditation to national accreditation through CALIA, which is the Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement. And so that's a 3-year process. We have not entered into an agreement with CALIA just yet, but what we are doing as we update policies, which happen all the time, it's not that simple to update a policy. And I think it's important to understand what it takes to update a policy. So say I want to have a change. Say I want to allow officers to have beards, and our policy says they have to be clean shaven. I can't just say, all right, I'm going to change this. No. I have to go to an accreditation manager. They have to look at the accreditation standard on uniform and appearance and make sure that we meet certain things within that standard, and then I can change it. And so it's a process, just to something that simple. And that's a good thing, right? I shouldn't just be able to snap my finger and say, I'm going to do this because I'm the chief, right? If we're going to be accredited, there's a significant oversight from the state accreditation with that, and then eventually national accreditation. But to my point, as we are updating policies with some of these things that we're talking about, we are using the CALIA model so that when we do transition, our policies are already in that format.
How many officers do you have now?
Well, we are allocated 110 sworn. Right now I have 81.
And what is the racial makeup generally of that group?
I can get back to you with that, but we have a lot of work to do.
Notice you have updated the website considerably so that it's now in the 21st century. It looks
We're
like.
trying, yes. A little out of time. We'll get there.
It's,
But yes, we are. And that's another thing I'm sure you've noticed. We're really trying to be more outward facing. Stuff we're doing and putting it out there and letting folks know when we do our community walks. Anybody come out and join us and walk with us. And so, yeah, we're trying to be much more outward facing and so that people don't think that there's this bubble over here of us just what we're doing in this building, you know. So.
Is there still a big salary gap between Charlottesville and Albemarle?
Yes, but I think there's some opportunity on the horizon. So council just passed the budget, and there's a 6% across the board raise that is going into effect on July 1st. But of more significance is the collective bargaining process that is set to begin over the summer for police, fire, and transit. And so that is an opportunity for the labor organizations to really sit at the table with the city and collectively bargain wages and benefits. And so with that will come benchmarking and looking at other jurisdictions, not just Albemarle or UVA, but other jurisdictions of our size. And they look at other things about who to benchmark with, like cost of living and stuff like that. So, so that'll be a process. So I think there's real opportunities there to make some progress. But to answer your question, yes, we still are the lowest paid when it comes to starting pay.
And the police department was previously excluded from the collective bargaining, right? Like, weren't they?
All public
I had heard
employees
that they were
were.
specific.
Well, in Virginia,
Virginia just
it
passed
was,
it.
yeah, it was illegal to collectively for public employees to collectively bargain.
Last year, year before. I believe.
2020, I believe.
2020,
Yeah.
Are you getting IA Pro?
So we have looked at IA Pro, and we are looking at, actually, Lieutenant Haney and Greg there went up to Alexandria to look at their model, because they use IA Pro and Blue Team.
What is IA?
So IA Pro is a internal affairs records management system that offers an early warning system. And then what an early warning system is, when say an officer just has gotten four complaints in a short period of time, a flag will come, hey, maybe there's something to look at here, or, certain amount of use of forces in a time, something to look at here. So we went up to look at it and found that actually they're looking to go to what we currently have. right?
Interesting. Oh, okay. All right.
Through Axon standards. What we found is that the system we currently have actually is going to offer that, correct?
Yes, they're in beta testing now, and we are gonna implement, Axon software into, our early intervention system and really utilize that IA module, for IA. So we hope to implement that. Axon's saying that the install should be completed by the summer, so it's really just a waiting game for them, but it makes sense for us to, the system we already have, Axon in place to utilize that standards piece instead of trying to go and transition to IA Pro, which is a brand new system, software, so.
So the answer, what you really ask is, are we going to have an early warning system? I know we've talked about that.
Well,
And the answer is yes.
The other question is, coordination between the PCOB and the police
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, the best way to share information and coordinate investigations, and so.
Absolutely, and I look forward to working with the new executive director and to work through those processes. But yeah, absolutely, any way we can do to make that process more efficient, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Any other?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Well,
Gentlemen, thank you.
well, thank you all. I do appreciate it. Thank you for the work you do.
Welcome to Charlottesville.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is the public comment. Traditionally, the way this works is we ask for public comments from the audience here first, and then from individuals on Zoom. And is there anyone here who would like to comment at this point?
I would.
Do you want to?
Come up to the mic. Okay.
I don't stutter, but my name is Kate Fraley. I'm a Charlottesville resident, and this is a question for you. But first, the bias-based policing policy that you all are working on. It would, in the past, I heard or knew of incidents where complaints were made about bias-based policing, and the evidence to prove it had to be some nasty language. So it wasn't ever demeanor or body language or movement or something like that. It always had to be some words. So when you write the new one, I hope it's a little bit more expanded, what the evidence is. And then my question for you, and maybe, I don't know, I've heard you talk about the relationship you have with the Albemarle County Police Department, and I was wondering about the relationship you're going to be developing with the rescue squad and the city fire department. I know that I think I know, that the rescue squad is very concerned lately about drug overdoses and substance use disorder treatment. And it seems like if there was an incident that you both arrived at the same place, that they have some expertise in that. So.
I'll answer that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Kate, are you sure you weren't in the police department about an hour ago? Because I was talking right about this.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
But I might know the person who was.
Okay, all right, good. So, the second question is the one I'll want to talk about first. So, my relationship with the fire chief is very good. So, Interim Chief Thomas and I have a very close relationship. I found out today that our officers have not not all of our officers have not been trained or given Narcan or naloxone. Narcan is a brand name, but naloxone training, which we need to fix that because one, we get it for free. It's not hard to get, and two, I don't know too many agencies where officers are not trained in it. So we are in the process of doing that. I spoke with Major Durrett today after I heard about it, and we are putting a process into place as we speak to get an instructor in and to get our officers trained on our Narcan and naloxone. And your first question was?
About bias-based policing.
The bias-based policing. I'll look at that and see how that turns out and looks, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
And we're going to have an item on that in our agenda and later, so. Okay, is there anyone online who would like to speak?
If you'd like to speak at this time, you can click the raise hand icon, or if you're joining us via telephone, press *9.
Hello, this is James. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask the chief earlier if the CPD and UVA police and Albemarle have a cadence, a regular cadence at which they're meeting. It seems like the last couple of months they've had to work together, a little bit more frequently. And I was just kind of curious if they have a regular meeting. Over.
Hi, Jade. So the quick answer to that is yes. So we are meeting monthly as a group, myself, Chief Longo, and Colonel Reeves, with our staff, command staff, other federal entities at a regional comp stat meeting, and that is a meeting where we all sit in a room, go over the data, what we're seeing, crime trends, who's involved. So it is a closed meeting because of the information that is shared. But yes, so we are doing that meeting. And as for just myself, Chief Longo, and Chief Reeves, we have lunch probably every other week and talk regularly. So.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anyone else here who wants to ask any questions.
There's no more hands raised in the Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Lakeisha, we have been sort of ignoring you. You've kind of been out of sight, out of mind. Do you have anything you would like to say or ask? And you are muted at this point.
No.
Okay, we'll make sure to to include you from now on. I apologize. Okay, the next item that we have is a very short summary of the information that we received from Office of Internal Affairs related to complaints filed in the month of March. And I'd like to thank Lieutenant Haney for providing this information. It's also available online, so you can see it in more detail. There were 4 complaints registered in March, 2 of them internal. The 2 internal complaints were identified as being more questions than service-related inquiries, basically, rather than complaints about specific behaviors by police. There was a question, a complaint related to the handling of a protective order, which the allegation that was investigated by Internal Affairs was unsatisfactory performance. The finding was exonerated. We have that closure letter. Thank you. And there was a question about there was a complaint related to a property damage caused by an officer, which at the time of the report was not, had not been resolved. Since the end of March, police have received a complaint about an officer not investigating a trespass incident seriously. That I haven't seen that in the summary yet, hasn't made it in yet. And in addition, we also, the board also received a report on our portal on civil about concerning an officer who was discourteous after a traffic accident. We've referred that complaint to Internal Affairs. The complainant has agreed to allow to have Internal Affairs investigate, because that's the way to get a result quickly. I've informed her of her right to appeal that, so I think that's moving forward. I'd like to make one comment before breaking for questions. There was Service-related, there was one question about an individual who was stopped early in the morning, very early in the morning. And the investigation of that incident was that no police guideline or rule had been violated. Nonetheless, if you read the individual's account, it is clear that that person was quite emotional, was kind of distressed. And so, this is sort of, again, this is where the PCOB maybe can, fit in a little bit. I know you can't comment on a specific case, but just in general, is there any comments that you want to make at this point? No, yeah, okay, I understand, because it is a copy.
Yeah, and, the one thing I would say, Bill, about all these investigations is we put out there, especially to the complainant, to say we're more than willing to speak with individuals, and with these letters, we try to explain some of our policies and procedures and the way they work so that they have a better understanding. When we talk about procedural justice, we talk about explaining why it is we do what we do, that education piece of it. And through these complaints, a lot of the service-related inquiries, where they may not end up in a policy violation, it is of great concern. And whenever you come into contact with said law enforcement officer, and you know it's a surprise, and they don't, individuals, and including I think all of us, we don't know what we don't know, right? And I think just having someone sit down and explain rules and regulations of why the officers did what they did and explaining their actions goes a long way. It still may not speak to, how that person felt in the moment, and I can't say that, and I can't speak, I would just like to, say that we want them to understand that, we do care. We want these inquiries to be brought forth to the police department, and they're taken seriously, every single one of them. And I'm not ever going to speak to someone's encounter or, put that information out there because it is an internal case. But the one thing that I do care about is that they were treated fairly and that they understand why the findings were what they were. You may not agree with them, but I'm going to explain to you. So we offer that to every complainant to come to the table and speak with us about how it was investigated, how we came to the outcome that we came to, and why.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about the? Okay, one last thing again. Just as last month, we still have two outstanding review requests. And owing to the imminent hiring of an executive director and to some work that Ms. Trisell has been doing, I think we're moving forward to being able to deal with those fairly soon. Now, I was wondering, Remy, could you make me allow me to share my screen?
Should already have the ability.
Okay. Share screen. Yeah, the next item here, it arises from a question that arose at our training session on April 1st, on Saturday, which I thought was extremely useful and informative. I pointed out that whenever the board makes findings about violations of policy or procedures or about the severity of a complaint, that it is bound by the disciplinary matrix. And the question arose, well, what's the disciplinary matrix? So I want to just very briefly introduce this. And if representatives of the department have anything to add, that's fine. You've had these in your inbox, so you may hopefully have read or be reasonably familiar with some of this. So basically, there are a whole lot of police general orders. They're all online, all free to the public. There are a number they cover basically, it's every conceivable aspect of policies and procedures. Some of that are most relevant to what we do are the disciplinary procedures, part 1 and 2, the code of conduct, and then my computer has just died. See if this works. Come on, guys. Mhm. Well, I am done here, I guess.
Did it reboot, Bill?
Yeah, I can try. There we go. Well, it's rebooting. Hmm. See where we're at. See if I can get back in. Okay. We'll come back to this. Okay, try again. Ah. Got to, I beg your pardon. Nah, it's never been this slow. I'm sorry. Okay. Got it. Okay, try again. Okay, so as I was saying, all of these are available online. And so anyone on the board who wants to go and become familiar with these and begin a dialogue about, potential modifications, please feel free to do so. But again, they represent sort of the legal framework within which the board has to operate for the time being. And so, until they're modified, this is kind of chapter and verse of what we are required to comply with. Part one of the disciplinary procedures is sort of a general discussion of the goals of disciplinary program. Some principles: use the least intrusive and punitive measure, use progressive discipline, that is, repeated offenses get gradually higher and higher levels of discipline. The idea of the disciplinary matrix is to achieve consistency, and minor infractions can be handled to some extent by supervisors. It also describes, when we get to the matrix, you'll see that there are different levels of severity, and it describes factors that can increase or decrease the level of severity in terms of mitigating versus escalating factors. It lists the allowable sanctions, which range from simply oral reprimand to dismissal. Actually, for minor infractions, corrective action can be simply counseling or training, and it does not need to be a formal oral or written reprimand. Part two. This is the matrix, as Keanu Reeves would say. This is the first panel of the matrix, and as you can see, it's broken into columns relating to severity, A through F. This panel is about general conduct. And you can see that while some allegations are very narrowly defined as being minor, others can be defined as minor or more major, A, D, C, D, or D, E, F, depending on the circumstances, and those escalating or mitigating factors, essentially.
Correct, Bill, and I'll just jump in really quick. So
Sure.
what you're seeing, is just a little way to explain this, the matrix, is you see your minor violations, your non-grievable, your class A's, where there's a possible violation of policy that you can discuss, right? There's no written reprimand. But depending on the severity or pattern or a reckoning period, this will move them into a higher class of violation, and or if the allegation or the violation is of significance, you have your D, E, F, and your major, which leads up to dismissal or termination. So just a little bit more explanation on that matrix.
Yeah, and this one's kind of hard to read, but it basically tries to summarize the various categories and sort of the typical allegations that go into the categories. As I say, you can use force outside of policy, and it can be A through C, depending on whether you shove somebody or grab them, presumably, depending on what the other factors are. The corrective action and discipline range from training to counseling, psychological services, and as you go upwards in severity, letters of reprimand come into play, suspensions or loss of leave or suspension without pay comes into play. And then as you get up to D, E, and F, you get very severe penalties. E and F are essentially very bad things involving domestic violence, harassment, discrimination, retaliation, excessive force as opposed to force outside of policy. And generally, the E and F violations are, whether it falls in there is based on the circumstances of the event. So it's essentially the same, but slightly more or slightly less severe.
Question for Lieutenant Haney.
Yes.
Does this cover most of what you need? I mean, does it cover most of the waterfront in terms of the examples that are on the chart?
So I will say this, in my time in internal affairs and looking at multiple cases across the board, I don't think there has always been a perfect situation that marries with this matrix. So the one thing when you all look at this and, and I think the one thing the chief and working with our accreditation supervisors to find best practices on the matrix and marrying it with disciplinary procedures part one, trying to find that fine balance between the two.
Okay.
So just to answer your question, no, it's not gonna work perfectly for every single scenario, and that's why we look at progressive discipline and trying to figure out where it falls in this matrix in these categories. But it's not a perfect system. I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Okay.
And that's why we're working with our accreditation manager and, the chief, and look at the best practices.
Yeah.
What else is out there? But this is what we're currently using. Yeah, so it's a work in progress, I'll say that, yeah.
And Bobby, does sexual harassment fall under harassment if you've got a superior sexually harassing a
Yes,
subordinate?
Yes.
Okay.
That would fall under that harassment category, yep.
Thank you.
And to the point, typically those cases will be handled by human resources.
Yeah.
So we've had cases.
And do you
cases
kick
like
them
that.
over there, chief? I mean, is that typically what happens?
Yes, so I would make a referral to human resources. They typically would hire outside counsel, independent investigator, typically an attorney that would do an independent investigation into it.
Okay. And then report back with
Yeah,
recommendations?
I would get the final report and go, and then we get into it.
Thank you.
No, and this is, the matrix is complicated. And so it's worth your while spending an hour or two reading,
Oh, yeah.
reading these two, these two orders, to get a better idea of what's there. Again, but when we make our decisions, we have to be able to refer to
Yeah.
these and be consistent. So that's one of the reasons why we're here. And finally, the last thing I want to touch on very briefly is the Code of Conduct Guidelines, which essentially, the purpose is to provide a more common basis for the disciplinary actions in the department, so people can know what to expect. There is a code of conduct, which is basically like the code of conduct for the COB, which is included in the document. And it defines about 35 or 40 different potential types of bad performance, ranging from courtesy to truthfulness, which is a key, again, not harassing people, citizen complaints, the police department and its employees are required to comply, to not interfere with people who want to make complaints, or make it hard for them to do so. There also, it also defines unbecoming conduct and statements and appearances, which is one that I didn't understand. But it basically means, making public statements that denigrate or bring into disrepute the police department, or presenting yourself as a police spokesman when you're not allowed to.
And I think it's important as we talk about the code of conduct, about how this, we have some legislation, or not legislation, there's legislation already passed around the decertification of officers. And so when that bill was passed, or that law was passed in 2020, it talked about a code of conduct and the violations of the code of conduct and being able to decertify police officers. So a decertification of a police officer is basically if you terminate an officer or they resign in lieu of termination as a result of an investigation of, say, A, B, C, or D, right? The chief of police shall, within 48 hours of that finding, submit decertification paperwork to the Department of Criminal Justice Services, who hold our certification. We don't hold the police certification of these officers. The state does, okay? So the reason I bring this up, though, the code of conduct has not been finalized yet. So there's a few things that are automatic decertification, but one of them is untruthfulness. So if an officer or someone who lies during an internal investigation and they have a sustained finding of untruthfulness, I have to send that paperwork, decertification paperwork, to the Department of Criminal Justice Services, who will then decertify that officer, and then there's a hearing if they want to appeal that through the state, and it's a long process. So I just wanted to make sure they have. So our code of conduct will probably mirror what the state's code of conduct for law enforcement officers is once that's finalized, and it's my understanding they're in that process. So.
Chief, quick question. If there is misbehavior in the officer's personal life, does it require a charge, like a domestic assault charge, to rise to the level that you or Lieutenant Haney or Sergeant Wade would get it?
It depends, but typically, yes.
Okay.
So if somebody is charged, or if we get an allegation that also involved in a domestic assault on their own time or something like that, well, one, you have a criminal matter,
Right.
right? And
Do you have an administrative piece of that too?
we do, but typically, as a best practice, do not start an administrative investigation until the criminal investigation
It's
is
complete.
over.
And does that go to come with attorney's office?
It would,
Okay.
absolutely. And the reason for that, there are rules, and we'll talk about that during training, about guarantee rights and all
Guarantee,
that
yeah.
stuff. That's very important to understand and respect,
Yeah.
so we don't,
Trample on that.
exactly, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So, this has been a brief whirlwind introduction to these documents. Again, certainly as part of your self-guided training, don't fail to go and take a look at them and become familiar. And then when we get into the real business of making decisions, that will become very useful. Before I move on to the next, issue. Let's stop sharing here. I'd like to ask, sorry. Couple of things related to training. One is you should have gotten notification by now that you have been given access to the Teams portal for the PCOB. The Teams portal for the PCOB contains a large number of documents, leading cases, NACAL presentations, guidebooks on investigations and oversight, which, again, was put together by Hansel Aguilar, God bless him, and thank him. And it's an invaluable resource, so I encourage people to go through and, if you have trouble going to sleep, you can read one of these cases, before you go to bed. Some of them are pretty interesting. Let's see. So if you have trouble accessing the PCOB library, what I'll do is I'll send you a a click sequence that will enable you to get in there if you want to. The next thing I'd like to ask is if anyone has any questions about any of the other training materials that you have been diligently reading and looking at for the last couple of weeks. No, okay, that's fine. I don't mean to embarrass anyone. Yeah, okay. I think that at the next meeting, probably what I will do is I'll put together a series of discussion questions related to hearings and investigations. And then we can spend our time going through those and looking at the applicable procedures. Okay. So now I guess it is time for, to hear from Susan Kirschel about her progress on hearing examiners.
Yeah, Bill had asked me to look into the best procedure for us to obtain hearing officers when we have an investigation that's going to that stage. And originally, it appeared to me that the ordinance that was passed required the city manager to maintain a list of hearing examiners, and those hearing examiners had to come from the executive secretary of the Supreme Court. I understand that that has either been repealed or it's been amended, and I'm not quite sure which, but they've made it less restrictive. However, now the hearing examiners must have either 5 years practice in active practice law, 5 years in the federal or state judiciary, or be a hearing officer from the executive secretary of the Supreme Court's approved list. They also have to be a member of good standing in the active judiciary or retired membership. So then the question became, well, how do we find this list of eligible hearing officers? Because my understanding is the city manager has not maintained a regular roster. So there are two things that I did. I contacted the executive secretary of the Supreme Court, and I am asking them for the procedure that they choose to follow when we need a hearing examiner. And they are going to be sending me some information about the procedure that they go through. The other option that came to mind is that we might be able to find some hearing examiners through the Charlottesville-Albemarle Bar Association. So I've been in contact with the president of that association. They also do not maintain any kind of list or roster of hearing examiners. However, they are happy to send out a notice to all of their bar members, seeing whether or not their retired or active bar association members would be willing to serve in this capacity. But before we do that, he wants a more descriptive list of exactly what this type of hearing examination officer would be responsible for doing, what type of training they must go through before they'll be able to do this, and whether they are paid or expected to be volunteer examiners. So it's my understanding from Bill that we do have some kind of a training program that they'll have to go through.
Yeah, so to answer those questions, our independent counsel, Pam O'Barry, is putting together a desk book, essentially a guide for hearing examiners for the PCOB, which is good timing. I suppose it should be ready by the end of next week. In addition, the executive director will start, in a couple of weeks, and so we'll be able to build some momentum on this. We also have always thought that and in terms of training, basically the folks have to read the desk book and undergo half-day training. So it's not huge, it's, you know, only $800 or $1,000 worth of legal time, you know, something like that, or more. But no. And let's see, what else?
Payment.
Yes, and they're going to be paid. So, and I think that we're all more comfortable with the paid model. You know, we have an employment contract with these people, you know, and we have some control over quality. I think one of the major questions right now is, you know, whether we can get Supreme Court certified people to agree or not. And that's going to be, it's going
I
to be.
mean, my guess is the executive secretary does maintain a roster.
Yeah.
A regular roster of hearing examiners. And one of the things that's, I think, a little bit easier for our hearing examiners is that they are just, we're the fact finders in this process. They're simply there to make sure that the evidence is followed and that the procedure is being respectful but they're not making any determinations. And so I think that makes that position a little bit simpler from their standpoint.
Susan, would retired judges be overqualified for this in your?
No.
No, not at all. In fact,
I can think of
they would
four
be
off
great.
the top of my head that live in the community.
You contact them, I'd say.
Okay, I'd be
Yeah,
happy
by all
to.
means.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
unfortunately, I have never practiced law here in Virginia, so I don't have a roster of friends in the legal community here. I just practice law in New York City. But I just want to end this in saying I do think, aside from the desk book that you're talking about, I do think it's important that perhaps we craft some kind of a letter or even a notice for the Bar Association to make it a little bit easier on them.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe we can work on that together once I see the desk book, maybe I'll have a better sense of
Yeah, and I say that's
what's expected.
due at the end of next week, and we can work from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Susan.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I mean, this has been hanging fire forever and ever.
This is just unresolved.
Yeah. So, two more items on our agenda, sort of business-related items. One is the bias-based policing recommendation, a draft of which I circulated to the board prior to this meeting. And the basic thrust of this is that the current definition of bias-based policing requires that the police's actions be exclusively based on race or gender, or, you know, whatever, which is impossible to ever determine. And so the bias-based policing recommendation, which was drafted by Bellamy Brown and myself, I think it's fairly near to final, you know, ready for a vote by the board. And I, again, you know, one more time, please take a look at it and give me any comments, and we can plan to vote on it at the next meeting. The other item that I had is one of the things this is sort of a personal reflection, is that one of the things that struck me about working with the board over the last couple of years is how much Major Durrett did for us while he was the interim chief, in terms of opening up, providing documents and information to us, opening the internal affairs process to us, making it clear to the internal affairs folks that they were supposed to do that. And so I drafted a very rough commendation, which again I have shared with you. And under the board's operating procedures, we can issue commendations for folks who have done outstanding community service, and I think this is worth pursuing. I don't know if anyone is comfortable voting on that now, or again, read it, comment on it. It's in pretty rough shape. We will definitely do it next time.
Bill, just FYI, he was on the walk yesterday, and I spent a fair amount of time talking to him and thanked him profusely for his reaching out to us, his openness, his cooperation, and how helpful he had been. So I'm not saying we don't do this, I'm saying we absolutely do this, but I'm also saying that if you see him,
Yeah.
please let him know how grateful we are.
Yeah, we've gone through 4 police chiefs,
In 4 years.
and so far, he's, he was sort of made a big difference.
He's also made, and the chief told me this yesterday, made a huge difference in just helping the chief get up to speed in terms of transitioning in the department, in terms of institutional memory, and just, hit the ground running, and he was, but the chief's comments immensely helpful.
That's good.
With the transition, which has been smooth, but from where I stand, the transition to the new chief is really going smoothly. And I think some of the credit for that goes to Major Durrett.
Okay. So, before we go to our second public comment period, is there any other business that we should be considering or putting on the agenda for next time? Anyone have any questions?
I didn't do it while the police chief was here because I wanted to make sure I was clear on what was happening. But during the interview time with individuals, are there hypothetical situations given
Oh, yes.
to officers? And the second question is, are there behavioral assessments done?
Yes.
There are, in the interviews, there were 2 or was it 3 scenario questions, one of which came right out of the code of conduct. And so, yes, and in the next step after the interview process is a psychological evaluation. So,
I would say, putting my psychologist hat on, that I think it's insufficient, the psych part. And I'm gonna be making some comments about that as we go down the road. It's too a boilerplate sort of.
well, yeah,
Anyway, but that's another story.
okay. I guess it's time for our second public comment period. Would anyone present like to speak? No? Okay, anyone online?
Nothing here.
Okay, James.
And
Guys, forgot I was here a bit.
No,
We
no.
couldn't possibly do that.
But no comment though.
and we have no hands raised at this time.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would make
Second.
that motion.
Any objections to adjournment? Hearing no objections, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Keisha.
Thank you, guys.
Do
Bye-bye.
better.